The stars looked different when you knew an enemy fleet was waiting behind them. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the main window of his ship, the USS Defiant, and watched the endless darkness of space. He had been a military officer for 15 years, but nothing in his training prepared him for this moment. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew what was coming. The Zaltharian Empire had sent a message 3 days ago. They wanted Earth to surrender. They wanted humanity to become part of their empire, to serve them, to give up everything that made them human. The message was clear and simple. Surrender or die. Jake turned away from the window and looked at his crew. First, Officer Lisa Grant sat at her station, checking the ship's systems for the 100th time. She was one of the best officers Jake had ever worked with. Smart, calm, and brave. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. At the engineering station, Bobby Chen was making final adjustments to the power systems. Bobby was young, only 28 years old. But he understood the ship's engines better than anyone. He had lost his older brother 5 years ago to a disease that doctors couldn't cure. Jake knew that loss had changed Bobby, made him value every moment of life. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the communications station. She was the one who would activate the device that might save humanity or doom them all. Amy had volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. She had 2 children back on Earth. But she told Jake that she was doing this for them, so they could grow up free. The scanner operator, Kevin Price, watched his screens carefully. His job was to track the alien fleet and report any changes. Kevin was quiet, the kind of person who thought carefully before speaking. But when he did speak, people listened. At the weapons station, Danny Wright kept checking his systems, even though he knew they wouldn't be using traditional weapons today. Danny had been a soldier before joining the space service. He understood combat, understood violence. That's why he hoped the plan would work. He had seen enough death. Helen Baker managed all incoming and outgoing communications. She was nervous. Jake could tell. Her hands shook slightly as she worked. But she stayed at her post, doing her job. That was courage, Jake thought. Being afraid, but doing it anyway. Dr. Claire Jensen stood near the medical station, ready for whatever might happen. She had treated injuries from training accidents and space sickness, but never combat wounds. She hoped today wouldn't change that. The door to the bridge opened, and Greg Palmer, the science officer, entered. He carried a data pad with the latest readings. Greg was the one who had helped develop the device they would use today. He looked tired. None of them had slept much in the past week. Jake moved to the center of the bridge and pressed a button on his chair. His voice would now reach every part of the ship. Every crew member would hear what he had to say. This is the captain speaking. In approximately 1 hour, we will reach the Zaltharian fleet. Our scanners show they have brought 2,000 ships. That's not a mistake. 2,000 warships are waiting for us. They expected Earth to send our full military to face them. Instead, Earth sent us. Just 1 ship. 47 people. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I know, some of you are scared. I'm scared too. But I want you to understand why we're here. The Zaltharians have conquered 17 different species. They've destroyed civilizations that were millions of years old. They win through fear and overwhelming force. They expect us to fight them with weapons and lose, or surrender without fighting. Jake looked around at his crew. We're going to do neither. We're going to show them something they've never seen before. We're going to show them who we are. Thanks for watching. Not just as warriors, but as humans. As people who love and hope and dream. As people who make mistakes and learn from them. We're going to make them understand us. Really understand us. Lisa Grant spoke up. And if it doesn't work, Captain, then we tried something no one else has tried before, Jake answered. We offered peace through understanding, instead of demanding it through strength. The bridge fell silent. Each person there knew the risks. The neural link array had been tested, but never on this scale. Never on an entire fleet. Never on aliens whose minds might work completely differently from human minds. The device would create a connection between the Defiant's crew and every conscious being in the Zaltharian fleet. It would share human experiences, human emotions, human memories. It would show the aliens what it meant to be human. The theory was that once they understood humanity, they couldn't simply destroy them. Empathy would make genocide impossible. But it was just a theory. And theories sometimes failed. Kevin Price's voice cut through the silence. Captain, long-range scanners show the Zaltharian fleet. 2,043 ships confirmed. They're in attack formation. Distance? Jake asked. 1 million kilometers and closing. At current speed, we'll reach them in 58 minutes. Jake sat in his command chair. All stations, prepare for neural link activation. Amy, begin the power-up sequence. Amy's fingers moved across her controls. Neural link array, powering up. Estimated time to full power, 45 minutes. The ship hummed with energy as the device drew power from the main reactor. Bobby Chen watched his screens carefully, making sure the power flow remained stable. One surge, one spike, and the whole system could fail. Power flow is steady, Bobby reported. All systems functioning within normal parameters. Jake opened a channel to engineering. Nicole, how are things down there? Nicole Adams, the engineering supervisor, responded immediately. We're holding steady, Captain. The reactor is handling the load. But we can't maintain this power level indefinitely. Once we activate the array, we'll have maybe 3 hours before we need to shut down and cool the system. Understood. 3 hours should be enough. Should be. Those two words carried a lot of weight. Should be enough time to make the Zalthrians understand. Should be enough time to prevent a war. Should be enough time to change everything. The minutes passed slowly. The crew worked in focused silence, each person performing their duties with careful precision. This was the moment they had trained for, prepared for, feared, and hoped for. Jake watched the main screen as the Zaltharian fleet grew closer. 2,000 ships, each one larger than the Defiant, each one carrying enough weapons to destroy a city, all of them waiting to see what one human ship would do. The hour passed quickly. Too quickly for those who wanted more time to prepare, and too slowly for those who just wanted it to begin. Jake Morrison watched the countdown timer on his screen. 15 minutes remained before the Zaltharian deadline expired. Neural link array at full power. Amy Rodriguez reported. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the underlying tension. All systems, ready for activation on your command. Jake stood and walked to the front of the bridge, looking at the massive alien fleet on the main screen. From this distance, the ships looked like stars, but he knew each one contained hundreds of warriors ready to attack. They had no idea what was about to happen. No idea that humanity's weapon wasn't made of metal and explosives. Open a channel to the Zaltharian fleet, Jake ordered. Helen Baker worked her controls. Channel open, Captain. Jake took a deep breath. Commander Vexnar, this is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth's vessel Defiant. We have received your ultimatum. Here is our response. We will not surrender. We will not fight you with weapons. Instead, we offer you something your empire has never been given before. We offer you understanding. Before Vexnar could respond, Jake nodded to Amy. Activate the neural link array. Amy pressed the activation button. The device came to life with a soft hum that grew louder, filling the bridge with a sound that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Jake felt the connection establish itself, felt his mind touch something vast and alien. Then, the sharing began. On every ship in the Zaltharian fleet, officers and crew members suddenly stopped what they were doing. Their minds filled with something impossible. They felt emotions that weren't their own. They experienced memories from lives they had never lived. Human lives. Human experiences. Human feelings. Commander Vex-Nar stumbled backward from his command post, clutching his head. He felt joy he had never known. He experienced the moment when Jake Morrison held his newborn daughter for the first time. The overwhelming love, the fierce protective instinct, the absolute certainty that he would do anything to keep this tiny human safe. Vex-Nar had offspring, but he had never felt this about them. In Zaltharian culture, offspring were assets, tools, for continuing the family line. This was different. This was pure, unconditional love. The experience shifted. Vex-Nar felt grief, deep and painful. He was Bobby Chen, standing at his brother's funeral, understanding that someone he loved was gone forever. The sadness threatened to crush him. But within the grief, there was something else. Memories of good times shared. Laughter and friendship. Love that continued even after death. Across the fleet, similar experiences flooded every Zaltharian mind. A weapons officer felt the determination of Lisa Grant as she studied for her command exams, refusing to quit even when the material seemed impossible. A navigator experienced the quiet pride of Kevin Price when he solved a complex navigation problem that had puzzled others for weeks. On the Defiance Bridge, the crew felt the connection flowing both ways. Claire Jensen gasped as Zaltharian memories entered her mind. She saw their world. A harsh planet where only the strong survived. She understood their culture of dominance, where showing weakness meant death. "Captain," Claire managed to say, "I'm seeing their history. Their world made them what they are. It's not evil. It's survival." Jake nodded, fighting to maintain his focus as alien emotions washed through his consciousness. He felt Vex-Nar's confusion, felt the Zaltharian commander's world being turned upside down. Good, that was the point. Make them question everything they thought they knew. Greg Palmer monitored the Neuralink's power levels. The device was working perfectly, better than their best simulations had predicted. The connection was strong and stable. Information flowed in both directions, creating a bridge between two species that had never truly understood each other. But not everyone in the Zaltharian fleet welcomed the experience. On several ships, commanders fought against the neural connection, trying to close their minds to the foreign emotions. They saw the empathy as an attack, a violation of their thoughts. War leader Kethra screamed orders to his crew, demanding they fire on the human ship immediately. "Captain, I'm detecting weapons charging on approximately 200 ships," Danny Wright reported. "They're preparing to attack." Jake had expected this. Some would resist. Some would see understanding as weakness. That was the risk they had accepted. "Maintain the neural link," Jake ordered. "Amy, can you increase the signal strength to those ships?" Amy checked her controls. "Yes, but it will require more power. We'll drain our reserves faster. 2,000. "Do it." The neural link intensified. On the ships preparing to attack, the crews suddenly experienced something new. Amy flooded their minds with memories of human warfare. Not the glory of victory, but the reality of violence. They felt what soldiers felt after battles. The nightmares, the guilt, the faces of enemies they had killed, that haunted them forever. They experienced the empty feeling of winning a war but losing part of yourself in the process. Several ships stopped charging their weapons. The crews couldn't reconcile the urge to kill with the understanding that killing left permanent scars on the killer as well as the killed. But some ships continued. War leader Kethra's mind was stronger than the others, or perhaps more closed. He pushed the emotions away and focused on duty, on orders, on the simple clarity of combat. Commander Vex-Nar watched his fleet falling into chaos. Through the neural link, he felt his warriors experiencing doubt for the first time in their lives. The Zaltharian Empire was built on absolute certainty. Might made right. The strong ruled the weak. Questions were for philosophers, not warriors. But now everyone was questioning. The humans had shown them a different way. A path where strength came from understanding, where victory didn't require the defeat of others. Vexenar felt his own certainty crumbling. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed, seemed less solid now. He accessed the neural connection voluntarily, no longer fighting it. He wanted to understand these humans. He needed to know how they could show such vulnerability to an enemy. In Zaltharian culture, revealing weakness was suicide. Yet here were the humans, deliberately showing their fears, their failures, their doubts to an empire that could destroy them. Through the link, Vexenar touched Jake Morrison's mind directly. He felt the human captain's fear for his crew, felt his uncertainty about whether the plan would work, felt his willingness to die if it meant preventing war. This confused Vexenar more than anything else. Jake was willing to sacrifice himself and his crew, not for victory, but for the chance at peace, for the possibility of understanding. Why? Vexenar transmitted through the neural link, his thought reaching Jake's mind. Why show us this? Why make yourself vulnerable? Jake's response came not in words but in pure feeling. Because this is who we are. Because we've learned that destroying each other is easy. But understanding each other is hard. And the hard things are worth doing. The answer shook Vexenar to his core. The humans weren't trying to trick them. They genuinely believed that empathy was strength, that understanding was power. They had weaponized vulnerability itself. On the Defiant, Bobby Chen called out a warning. Captain, power reserves at 60% and dropping. We can maintain the neural link for another 90 minutes at current levels. Acknowledged, Jake responded. He kept his mental connection to Vexenar open, pushing more experiences through the link. He shared humanity's history, the wars, the peace treaties, the slow, painful journey from primitive tribes to spacefaring civilization. He showed the mistakes, the genocides, the moments when humans had acted exactly like the Zaltharians were acting now. Most importantly, he showed how humanity had learned from those mistakes, how they had grown beyond their violent past, how they had discovered that cooperation created more than competition ever could. The Zaltharian fleet hung in space, 2,000 ships paralyzed by an experience none of them had ever imagined. The neural link had done what no weapon could do. It had made them feel, made them understand, made them question whether conquest was the only path forward. But the moment of understanding was fragile. War leader Kethra rallied his ships, 50 warships that rejected the emotions flooding their minds. They saw the neural link as an attack that needed to be answered with violence. Traditional, simple, understandable, violence. The first energy blast struck the Defiant's shields with enough force to shake the entire ship. Crew members grabbed their stations to avoid being thrown to the floor. Alarms blared across the bridge as systems reported the damage. Shields holding at 78%. Danny Wright called out. 20 more ships are targeting us. If they all fire together, our shields won't last long. Jake kept his eyes on the main screen where the Zaltharian fleet was splitting apart. Some ships moved to protect the Defiant from Kethra's attack. Others held position, their crews still processing the emotions flooding through the neural link. The most violent internal conflict was happening inside individual ships, where officers who felt human empathy argued with those who rejected it. Through the neural link, Jake felt the chaos in Vexenar's mind. The Zaltharian commander was experiencing something his species had no word for. A crisis of conscience. Should he stop Kethra's attack and protect the humans who were showing his people a new way to exist? Or should he follow military doctrine and destroy the ship that was affecting his fleet's ability to fight? Another blast hit the Defiant. Then another. The shield strength dropped to 52%. Captain, if we redirect power from the neural link to shields, we can survive longer. Bobby Chen suggested. His hands moved across his controls, ready to make the transfer. Negative, Jake responded firmly. We maintain the link. That's the mission. That's the only thing that matters. Lisa Grant looked at her captain with understanding. They had all known this might happen. They had all accepted that they might die. But they had also accepted that dying while trying to create peace was better than killing in the name of survival. Amy Rodriguez felt tears running down her face. She thought of her 2 children back on Earth. Would they understand why their mother had volunteered for this mission? Would they know she did it for them, so they could live in a galaxy where understanding was possible? Through the neural link, Kethra felt Amy's emotions. Felt her love for children he would never meet. Felt her hope for a future she might never see. The emotions angered him. This was the weapon the humans used. They made you feel things that weakened your resolve. They made you care about the enemy. He pushed the feelings away and ordered his ships to fire again. But something unexpected happened. 3 of Kethra's ships didn't fire. Their crews had felt Amy's maternal love so strongly that they couldn't bring themselves to kill her. The simple act of a mother thinking about her children had done what logic couldn't. It had made the enemy human. Commander Vexnar made his decision. He opened a fleet-wide channel, his words reaching every ship simultaneously. All vessels. This is Commander Vexnar. I am ordering War Leader Kethra to stand down immediately. Any ship that continues to fire on the human vessel will answer to me personally. Kethra's response was immediate and defiant. You are compromised by the human mind weapon. You are no longer fit to command. I am taking control of the fleet under emergency military protocol. The Zalthrian fleet fractured into 3 distinct groups. Roughly 800 ships followed Vexnar's order and moved into defensive positions. 50 ships under Kethra's direct command continued their attack. The remaining ships held position, their commanders paralyzed by indecision, still processing the flood of human experiences through the neural link. On the Defiant, Helen Baker tracked the communications between Zaltharian ships. Captain, they're in open conflict. Some are threatening others. Their command structure is collapsing. Jake felt sick. They had hoped to prevent a war, not start a civil war within the Zaltharian Empire. Through the neural link, he felt the confusion and fear of thousands of alien minds. They were experiencing something they had no cultural framework for understanding. They were feeling empathy for the first time, and it hurt. Claire Jensen moved between stations, checking on crew members who were struggling with the 2-way connection. Several people had severe headaches from the strain of maintaining the neural link. Others were disoriented from experiencing alien thoughts and emotions. The human mind wasn't designed to process this much information from so many sources. Captain, we need to reduce the link's intensity, Claire urged. The crew is approaching their limits. Jake knew she was right, but he also knew that reducing the signal might cause them to lose the progress they had made. The moment the connection weakened, those who wanted to fight could push away the empathy they were feeling. Another volley of energy blasts hammered the Defiant's shields. The power level dropped to 28%. One more concentrated attack, and the shields would fail. After that, the ship's hull would protect them for maybe 30 seconds before the Defiant was torn apart. Greg Palmer looked up from his science station. Captain, I'm detecting an anomaly in the neural link. Something's happening with the alien responses. They're not just receiving our emotions anymore. They're sending something back. What do you mean? Jake asked. I mean, they're deliberately sharing their experiences with us. It's not automatic anymore. Some of them are choosing to show us what they feel, what they've lived through. 770. Jake felt it then. A surge of information from Vexnar's mind. The Zaltharian commander was sharing his own memories, his own experiences. Jake saw Vexnar's youth on a harsh world where every day was a struggle to survive. He felt the pain of losing family members to violence and disease. He understood how constant struggle had shaped Zaltharian culture into something hard and unyielding. But he also felt something else. A deep loneliness that Vexnar had never acknowledged before. The loneliness of a species that had conquered 17 civilizations, but had never made a single friend. The Zaltharians were powerful, but they were alone in a way that went beyond physical isolation. Other Zaltharian minds opened voluntarily. Scientists shared their curiosity about the universe. Soldiers shared their weariness with endless conquest. Ordinary crew members shared their secret hopes that there might be more to existence than serving the Empire. "They're reaching back," Amy whispered. "They want to connect with us." The revelation changed everything. The neural link wasn't just humanity showing aliens what it meant to be human. It had become a genuine exchange. A conversation between species. The Zaltharians were discovering that they had been lonely without knowing it. And now, they had found someone who wanted to understand them. War leader Kethra felt the shift in his fleet's mood. Through the neural link, he sensed his warriors losing their will to fight. They were being seduced by human emotions, corrupted by foreign concepts like compassion and empathy. He needed to end this quickly before the infection spread further. "All ships under my command, concentrated fire on the human vessel. Destroy them now," Kethra ordered. 50 ships fired simultaneously. The massive barrage of energy struck the Defiant's shields and shattered them completely. The ship lurched violently as the overflow energy struck the hull. Structural alarms screamed. Bobby Chen fought to keep the power systems online as conduits overloaded throughout the ship. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Nicole Adams reported from engineering. "Emergency force fields are holding. But we can't take another hit like that." Jake gripped his chair as the ship shook. They were out of time. In seconds, Kethra would fire again and finish them. The mission had failed. They had tried to create understanding and instead had created chaos and death. But then, something unexpected happened. Ships that had been holding position, the ones whose commanders couldn't decide what to do, suddenly moved. They positioned themselves between the Defiant and Kethra's attack force. Hundreds of Zaltharian warships created a protective barrier around the small human vessel. Through the neural link, Jake felt the determination of these commanders. They had made their choice. They chose understanding over violence. They chose the possibility of something new over the certainty of what they had always known. Commander Vexnar's ships joined the protective formation. Now, over 1,000 Zaltharian vessels surrounded the Defiant, shielding it from Kethra's forces. For the first time in their empire's history, Zaltharians were protecting an alien ship from other Zaltharians. Kethra stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His warriors had betrayed the Empire. They had chosen the enemy over their own kind. The human mind weapon had corrupted them completely. "This is treason," Kethra transmitted on the open channel. "You are all traitors to the Empire. When this is over, you will be executed for your betrayal." Vexnar's response was calm and measured. "No, Kethra. This is not treason. This is evolution. The humans have shown us that there's another way. A better way. I'm tired of conquest. I'm tired of destroying species that could have been our friends. I'm tired of being alone in the universe." Jake listened to the exchange through the neural link. He felt Vexnar's sincerity. The Zaltharian commander wasn't being controlled or manipulated. He had genuinely changed his mind based on what he had experienced. That was the power of empathy. Once you truly understood someone, destroying them became nearly impossible. Bobby Chen's voice cut through the moment. "Captain, power reserves at 15%. We have maybe 20 minutes before total system shutdown. We need to decide what to do." Captain. Jake looked at his crew. They were exhausted, injured, and the standoff in space continued for 3 hours. On one side, war leader Kethra commanded 50 ships still loyal to traditional Zaltharian values. On the other side, Commander Vexnar led over 1,000 vessels that had experienced the neural link and wanted to explore what it meant. In the middle, the damaged Defiant hung in space, its crew exhausted but alive. Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and tried to think clearly despite the headache pounding behind his eyes. The neural link was still active at low power, and he could feel the tension between the two Zaltharian factions. It was like standing between two groups of people about to start a fight, except the groups had enough weapons to destroy planets. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Commander Vexnar," Helen Baker announced. "He wants to speak with you directly. Put him through." Vexnar's face appeared on the screen. He looked different somehow. His expression was less rigid, his eyes less cold. The neural link had changed him in visible ways. "Captain Morrison, I want to thank you for what you've shown us. My people have existed for thousands of years, but we never knew we were missing something until today. However, we now have a problem. War leader Kethra sees the changes in us as a disease. He will try to destroy anyone infected by your empathy, including his own people." Jake nodded slowly. "We didn't mean to start a war within your empire. We just wanted to show you there were alternatives to conquest." "I know," Vexnar replied. "And that's exactly why Kethra fears you so much. You've proven that our entire civilization is built on a choice, not a necessity. We chose to be conquerors. We could choose to be something else. That possibility terrifies those who have built their entire identity on being strong and ruthless." Lisa Grant leaned toward Jake and whispered, "We need to shut down the neural link soon. The system is overheating, and the crew needs rest. But if we disconnect now, will the Zaltharians who experienced empathy be able to hold on to it?" It was a good question. Empathy wasn't like knowledge that you could simply remember. It was a feeling, an experience. Once the neural link shut down, would the Zaltharians revert to their old ways? Would they decide that conquest was easier than cooperation after all? Through the faint connection still active, Jake felt Vexnar's concern about the same issue. The Zaltharian commander understood that his people's transformation was fragile. They had felt human emotions for a few hours. That wasn't enough to change a culture millions of years old. "Commander Vexnar," Jake said carefully, "what happens when we disconnect? Will your people remember what they learned?" Vexnar was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Some will. Some won't. Some will try to forget because remembering is uncomfortable. Change is difficult. Captain, your species knows this. How long did it take humans to stop fighting each other?" "We still fight sometimes," Jake admitted. "But we've gotten better at talking first. We've learned that understanding prevents more conflicts than weapons ever could." On the Defiance Bridge, Greg Palmer studied the data from the neural link. "Captain, I'm seeing something interesting. The Zaltharians who voluntarily opened their minds to share their experiences with us show different brain patterns than those who just received our emotions. The ones who reached back, who tried to make us understand them, those connections seem stronger, more permanent." Jake understood what Greg was saying. Empathy worked both ways. The Zaltharians, who had only received human emotions, might forget them when the link ended. But those who had shared their own experiences, who had tried to make humans understand them, they had invested something of themselves in the connection. They had become active participants instead of passive receivers. "Greg, can we encourage more of that two-way sharing before we shut down?" Jake asked. "Maybe, but it has to be voluntary. We can't force them to open up. That would be the same kind of violation Kethra accuses us of." Jake made a decision. "Amy, prepare to boost the neural link one more time, but configure it to encourage voluntary sharing from the Zaltharians. Make it easy for them to show us who they are." Amy worked her controls, adjusting the link's parameters. "Ready, Captain. But this will drain our remaining power reserves. After this, we'll have to shut down completely." "Do it." The neural link pulsed with renewed strength, but this time the flow was different. Instead of pushing human experiences at the Zaltharians, it created an open channel, an invitation to share. The change was subtle but significant. Across the Zaltharian fleet, thousands of individuals felt the invitation. Some ignored it. uncomfortable with the vulnerability required. But many others accepted. They opened their minds and let humans see their world, their lives, their hopes and fears. Jake felt himself drowning in alien experiences. He saw Zaltharian children learning to fight before they learned to read. He felt the pride of warriors winning their first battles. He understood the complex honor codes that governed Zaltharian society. But he also felt the hidden doubts, the secret wishes for peace, the unspoken dreams of a life beyond conquest. Claire Jensen gasped as she experienced the memories of a Zaltharian medical officer. The alien had spent his life treating injuries from constant warfare. He was tired. So tired of patching up warriors just so they could go out and get hurt again. He wanted to heal. Not for war, but for life itself. Kevin Price connected with a Zaltharian navigator who loved exploring new star systems. The navigator saw beauty in the universe, in the swirl of galaxies and the birth of stars. He hated that every new discovery just meant finding new species to conquer. Danny Wright experienced something unexpected. He connected with a Zaltharian soldier who felt exactly the way Danny did. The soldier had seen too much violence. He had killed too many beings. He wanted the killing to stop, but he didn't know how to be anything other than a warrior. Through these connections, the humans began to understand. The Zaltharians weren't evil. They weren't monsters. They were people trapped in a system that demanded they be strong, that punished weakness, that offered no path except conquest. They had built a civilization on violence because they didn't know how to build one on anything else. And now, for the first time, they were seeing an alternative. Not a perfect alternative. The neural link had shown them that humans made plenty of mistakes. But it was different. It was a choice they hadn't known existed. War leader Kethra felt his support crumbling. Through the neural link, even ships under his command were beginning to question. He watched officers who had served him faithfully for years suddenly hesitate before following orders. The human disease was spreading faster than he could contain it. All ships, prepare to withdraw, Kethra ordered. We're returning to the Empire's core systems. We will report what happened here, and return with a fleet that hasn't been contaminated by human emotions. But only 20 ships followed him. 30 ships that had been under his command refused to leave. Their crews had experienced too much to go back to the old ways. They couldn't unknow what they now knew. They couldn't unfeel what they had felt. Commander Vexnar watched Kethra's ships retreat and felt relief mixed with sadness. The Empire would split now. Those who accepted change and those who rejected it. There would be conflict, maybe even civil war. On the Defiant, Bobby Chen's voice held urgency. Captain, we're at critical power levels. We need to shut down the neural link now, or we risk a complete reactor failure. Jake looked at his crew. They were barely conscious, overwhelmed by hours of intense mental connection with thousands of alien minds. They had given everything they had to give. It was time to let go. Amy, shut down the neural link. All power to life support and essential systems only. Amy pressed the shutdown sequence. The neural link's hum faded away. The connection that had linked human and Zaltharian minds severed. Both species suddenly felt alone again, and the loneliness was crushing after the intimacy of shared consciousness. But something remained. The memories, the understanding, the brief glimpse they had given each other into their souls. That couldn't be erased simply by disconnecting a machine. Commander Vexnar felt the absence of human thoughts in his mind, like losing a sense he had just discovered. But he remembered. He remembered what Jake Morrison felt when holding his daughter. He remembered Bobby Chen's grief for his brother. He remembered the fierce loyalty of the Defiant's crew to each other. Those memories would stay with him forever. Across his fleet, thousands of Zaltharians felt the same way. They had been changed by what they experienced. Not all of them. Not permanently, perhaps. But enough to matter. Enough to make a difference. Vexnar opened a communication channel to the Defiant. Captain Morrison, my people and I need time to process what we've learned. We need to understand what we've become. I'm ordering my fleet to withdraw to a neutral system where we can think, debate, and decide what we want our future to look like. Jake nodded, too exhausted to speak much. I will want to talk more, Vexnar promised. This isn't ending, Captain. It's beginning. The massive Zaltharian fleet began to move. Ships breeze 6 months passed before Earth heard from the Zalthrians again. 6 months, during which humanity debated what the neural link meant for their future. Some people celebrated the victory, calling it the greatest achievement in human history. Others worried about what they had unleashed, fearing the consequences of tampering with alien minds. The Defiant spent 3 months in repair docks. The damage from Kethra's attack had been severe, though not as bad as it could have been. Jake Morrison watched the repairs from his temporary office on Earth's orbital station. He had been called back to explain what happened, to justify the decision to use the neural link, to answer questions from political leaders who wanted to know if humanity had made an enemy or a friend. The answer, Jake told them repeatedly, was neither. They had made something more complicated than that. They had made the Zalthrians think. They had introduced doubt into an empire built on certainty. Whether that led to peace or war remained to be seen. Lisa Grant had been promoted. She was now in charge of Earth's first diplomatic station designed specifically for communicating with the Zalthrians. The station was heavily defended, but its weapons were secondary to its primary purpose, which was understanding. Lisa had handpicked a team of linguists, psychologists, and cultural experts to staff the station. Bobby Chen returned to engineering research, working on improving the neural link technology. The device had worked, but barely. It had nearly destroyed the Defiance reactor and caused severe mental strain on the crew. If humanity was going to continue using empathy as a tool for peace, they needed a better version that wouldn't burn out ships and minds. Amy Rodriguez took a leave of absence. The neural link had affected her more deeply than the others. She had felt the minds of thousands of aliens, had shared her deepest emotions with creatures who didn't even look human. The experience changed her in ways she was still trying to understand. She spent her leave at home with her children, grateful for every ordinary moment. The rest of the crew scattered to various assignments. Some stayed in the space service. Others retired, feeling they had done enough. Danny Wright became an instructor, teaching new officers about the day one human ship faced an empire. Kevin Price went back to navigation school as a teacher. Helen Baker wrote a book about the experience, though she changed the names to protect crew members who wanted privacy. Claire Jensen opened a clinic specializing in helping people who had experienced the neural link. As more humans began using the technology, more started having psychological effects from connecting with alien minds. Claire's experience on the Defiant made her uniquely qualified to help them process what they had felt. Greg Palmer continued his research into the neural link's effects on both human and alien minds. His work became the foundation for a new field of study called xenoempathy, which explored how different species could share experiences across the vast differences in their biology and culture. Then, 6 months after the confrontation, a single Zalthrian ship approached Earth's space. It transmitted a request for permission to enter the solar system and meet with human representatives. The ship belonged to Commander Vexnar. Jake Morrison was called back to active duty for the meeting. They wanted him there, the man who had made first contact through the neural link. Jake agreed, though he felt nervous about seeing Vexnar again. What if the Zalthrian commander had changed his mind? The meeting took place on Lisa Grant's diplomatic station. Security was tight, but Lisa insisted on keeping the atmosphere as non-threatening as possible. The conference room was designed to be comfortable for both species, with adjustable gravity and lighting to accommodate Zalthrian preferences. When Vexnar entered the room, Jake was struck by how different he looked. The Zalthrian commander seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. It took Jake a moment to realize what had changed. Vexnar wasn't wearing military armor. He was dressed in simple civilian clothing, which, for a high-ranking Zaltharian officer, was almost unheard of. "Captain Morrison," Vexnar said in greeting. His translator rendered the words in English, but Jake could hear the original Zalthrian underneath, could recognize the tone of genuine warmth. "Commander Vexnar, it's good to see you again." They sat across from each other at a table that had been carefully designed to not favor either species. Lisa Grant sat beside Jake, ready to help facilitate the conversation. On Vexnar's side sat a Zalthrian who introduced himself as Velthas, a scientist and advisor. "I want to tell you what has happened since we last met," Vexnar began. "The neural link changed my people in ways we're still discovering. The Empire has split into 3 factions. War leader Kethra leads those who reject everything the link showed us. They see empathy as weakness and want to return to pure conquest. About 20% of our military follows him." Jake listened carefully, watching Vexnar's expressions. The translator handled words, but body language told its own story. The second faction, the largest at about 50%, are those who experience the link, but aren't sure what to do with that experience. They remember feeling human emotions, but they struggle to integrate those feelings into their daily lives. They want change, but don't know how to change. "And the third faction?" Lisa asked. "That's us," Vexnar said quietly. "About 30% of the Empire's population felt the neural link and decided we want to be different. We're tired of conquest. We're tired of being alone in the universe. We want to learn cooperation, but we don't know how. That's why I'm here. We need help." The admission shocked Jake. A Zalthrian commander, a representative of an empire that had conquered 17 civilizations, was asking humanity for help. Not military help or technology. Help learning how to be different. "What kind of help?" Jake asked carefully. Velthas spoke up. "We need to understand how human civilization functions. You showed us through the neural link that humans cooperate, that they build societies based on mutual benefit rather than dominance. But we don't understand the details. How do you resolve conflicts without combat? How do you make decisions without one leader forcing their will on everyone else? How do you maintain order without fear?" Lisa Grant smiled slightly. "Those are complicated questions. And honestly, we don't always do those things successfully. Humanity struggles with cooperation too. But you try," Vexnar said. "That's the difference. You've built systems designed to encourage cooperation. We've built systems designed to enforce dominance. We want to rebuild our systems, but we need guidance." Jake looked at Lisa, then back at Vexnar. This was exactly what they had hoped for when they activated the neural link. Not instant peace, but a willingness to try something new. The hard work of actually changing came after understanding, and it seemed the Zalthrians were ready for that hard work. "We'll help however we can," Jake said. "But you need to understand that changing an entire civilization takes time. Generations. Maybe. And not everyone will support the change." "I know," Vexnar replied. "Kethra has already declared war on my faction. We're fighting a civil war now. Zalthrians against Zalthrians, something that has never happened in our recorded history. But I believe it's necessary. Sometimes, you have to fight for the right to change." Over the next hours, they discussed possibilities. Exchange programs where Zalthrians could live among humans and learn cooperation through experience. Joint projects that required both species to work together toward common goals. Educational programs that would teach young Zalthrians about alternatives to conquest. But the most significant proposal came from Velthas. The Zalthrian scientist suggested creating permanent neural link stations where members of both species could voluntarily share experiences, not forced connections like the one during the confrontation, but chosen moments of empathy between individuals who wanted to understand each other. "The link showed us what was possible," Velthas explained. "But the experience was overwhelming. Too much, too fast. If we could share experiences in smaller, controlled ways, both species could learn from each other gradually." Greg Palmer, who had been invited to join the meeting via video link, enthusiastically supported the idea. We've been working on exactly that. A new version of the neural link that creates one-to-one connections between individuals. It's safer, more controlled, and allows for genuine dialogue instead of just information transfer. The meeting lasted 6 hours. When it ended, they had the outline of an agreement. Humanity would help the Zolthrian Reform faction learn cooperation. In return, the Zolthrians would share their advanced technology and their knowledge of the galaxy. Both species would benefit, but more importantly, both species would change. As Vexnar prepared to leave, he stopped and turned back to Jake. I want you to know something, Captain Morrison. What you did 6 months ago was terrifying. You reached into our minds and forced us to feel things we had never felt before. Some see that as an attack, but I see it as the greatest gift one species has ever given another. You gave us the ability to choose. For the first time in our existence, we can choose to be something other than conquerors. Thank you for that. Jake felt emotion welling up in his chest. Thank you for being brave enough to accept the choice. A lot of species would have rejected it, fought against it, until the end. Some of us are fighting against it, Vexnar reminded him. But not all. And that's enough. That's more than enough. After Vexnar's ship departed, Jake and Lisa stood at the observation window, watching the Zolthrian vessel disappear into the darkness of space. We did something important, Lisa said softly. Maybe the most important thing humanity has ever done. Maybe, Jake agreed. Or maybe we just started something that will take centuries to fully understand. Either way, we tried. We offered empathy instead of weapons. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. At least for some of them. Lisa looked at her former captain. What happens now? Jake smiled. Now comes the hard part. Building on what we started. Making sure the connection between our species doesn't fade. Proving that cooperation can work even when it's difficult. 2 years after the confrontation with the Zolthrian fleet, the galaxy looked very different. The Zolthrian civil war continued, but it had evolved into something more complex than simple military conflict. It had become a philosophical war, a struggle between those who wanted change and those who feared it. Jake Morrison no longer captained a warship. He now taught at the Interspecies Relations Academy on Earth, a school created specifically to train humans and aliens in the art of cooperation. His students came from multiple species, including a growing number of Zolthrians who wanted to learn humanity's approach to conflict resolution. On this particular morning, Jake stood before a class of 30 students. 20 were human. 10 were Zolthrian. The mix still surprised him sometimes, seeing former enemies sitting side by side, learning together. Can anyone tell me the most important lesson from the Defiance encounter with the Zolthrian fleet? Jake asked his class. A young human woman named Rachel raised her hand. That empathy is more powerful than weapons? Jake nodded. That's part of it. But what made empathy powerful in that situation? A Zolthrian student named Thexral spoke up. His voice, even through the translator, carried uncertainty. You made us vulnerable. You showed us your weaknesses, your fears, your doubts. In my culture, that should have made you easy to destroy. But instead, it made destroying you impossible. Why? Jake pressed. Why did our vulnerability protect us? Thexral thought for a moment. Because once we understood you, killing you meant killing something we recognized. You weren't just aliens anymore. You were people, and we knew that if we could kill people we understood, we would have to live with that knowledge forever. The guilt would be permanent. The 1 week, Jake smiled. Exactly. That's the real power of the neural link. Not that it showed emotions, but that it created understanding deep enough to make violence unthinkable. Not impossible. Unthinkable. There's a difference. The lesson continued, but Jake's mind wandered briefly to the bigger picture. The experiment that had started with one ship facing an empire had grown into something much larger. Earth now had diplomatic relations with 12 alien species. including the Zalthrian Reform faction led by Vexnar. Bobby Chen had perfected the new neural link technology. The devices were now small enough to be portable, safe enough for regular use, and sophisticated enough to create genuine two-way connections between individuals. Thousands of humans and Zalthrians had used the links to share experiences, building bridges of understanding, one connection at a time. But the technology had also created new problems. Some humans became addicted to the intense experiences of connecting with alien minds. Some Zalthrians found the empathy so overwhelming that they withdrew from society completely. And there were always those who tried to weaponize the technology, who saw the neural link as a tool for manipulation rather than understanding. That's why Jake's Academy existed. To teach people how to use empathy responsibly, how to share experiences without losing themselves, how to understand others without trying to control them. After class ended, Jake met with Lisa Grant in his office. She had come from her diplomatic station to discuss a new development. Her expression was serious, which meant the news wasn't good. Kethra is planning something, Lisa said without preamble. Our intelligence suggests he's building a new fleet, bigger than the one we faced 2 years ago, and he's specifically designed ships that can resist the neural link. Shielded crew quarters, mental discipline training, psychological conditioning, to reject empathy. He's preparing for another confrontation. Jake felt his stomach tighten. They had known this might happen. Kethra represented the faction that saw change as betrayal. For people like him, the neural link wasn't a gift, but an attack on everything they believed. And now, he was coming back with an army that couldn't be touched by empathy. How long do we have? Jake asked. 6 months, maybe less. He's rallying support from other species who fear what the neural link represents. Species who see humanity's approach as cultural imperialism, forcing our values on others through technology. Are they wrong? Jake asked quietly. Are we forcing our values on others? Lisa was silent for a moment. I don't think so. We offer the link voluntarily. We share our experiences but don't demand others change. But I can see how it might look different from the outside, especially to species who value cultural independence above everything else. Jake stood and walked to his window, looking out at the academy grounds where human and Zalthrian students walked together, talked together, learned together. But it had also created division, conflict, fear. What does Vexnar say? Jake asked. He says his faction will fight beside us if Kethra attacks. But he's worried. His people are learning cooperation, but they're not very good at it yet. 2 years isn't enough time to undo millions of years of cultural programming. Many of his warriors still think in terms of dominance and submission. They're trying to change, but change is slow. Jake thought about his students, about Thexral, and the other young Zalthrians who came to Earth specifically to learn a different way of living. They were the future, the generation that might truly bridge the gap between species. But they were also vulnerable, caught between two cultures, belonging fully to neither. We need to show the galaxy that the neural link isn't about control, Jake said. It's about choice. Every species has to choose for themselves whether they want understanding or isolation. And if they choose isolation, Lisa asked, then we respect that choice. Even if it means some species will never connect with us. Even if it means some will see us as enemies. We can't force empathy on anyone. That would defeat the entire purpose. Over the following months, Jake watched as the galaxy continued to change. The Zalthrian Reform faction grew slowly, adding members who had experienced the neural link and decided they wanted something different. But Kethra's faction grew too, fueled by fear of change and resentment of humanity's influence. Other species watched carefully, trying to decide which side represented the future. Some opened diplomatic channels with Earth, curious about the neural link. Others closed their borders, determined to preserve their traditional ways. The galaxy was polarizing, splitting into those who embraced change and those who rejected it. Kevin Price, now captain of the USS Defiant, took the repaired ship on a mission to visit species on the edge of this divide. His orders were simple. Offer understanding, but never demand it. Show what cooperation could achieve, but respect the choice to remain separate. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes species accepted the offer and began the difficult process of learning to connect with others. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes fear was stronger than curiosity, and species rejected contact entirely. But each connection that did form, each bridge that was built, added to the network of understanding slowly spreading through the galaxy. It wasn't happening quickly. Real change never did. But it was happening. Amy Rodriguez returned to active duty, serving as the chief neural link operator on a new class of diplomatic vessels. Her job was to facilitate voluntary connections between species, to help aliens and humans share experiences safely. She found the work healing. Where the confrontation with the Zolthrian fleet had been overwhelming, these smaller, chosen connections felt right. Danny Wright led a team training other species in non-violent conflict resolution. He taught them what the neural link had taught him, that understanding your enemy was more effective than defeating them. Some students embraced the lessons. Others rejected them. Danny learned to accept both outcomes. Claire Jensen's clinic expanded, offering services to multiple species. The psychological effects of deep empathy crossed species boundaries. Whether you were human or Zolthrian or something else entirely, connecting with an alien mind changed you. Claire helped people process those changes, integrate them into their sense of self. Greg Palmer won awards for his research into xenoempathy. His work showed that, while species were biologically different, certain emotional experiences were universal. Love, fear, hope, grief, these existed across species lines. The neural link didn't create these emotions. It just revealed they had always been there, waiting to be recognized. As the 6-month deadline approached, Jake received a message from Vexnar. The Zalthrian commander wanted to meet in person at the academy. When he arrived, Jake could see the strain of leading a faction through civil war had aged him. Kethra will attack soon, Vexnar said. He has a fleet of 800 ships, all protected against the neural link. He's also gathered support from 3 other species who see your empathy as a threat. This will be different from our first encounter. You can't simply make them understand. I know, Jake replied. We've been preparing, but not for war. We're preparing to defend ourselves, while continuing to offer understanding to anyone who wants it. That might not be enough, Vexnar warned. Kethra is fighting to preserve a way of life. He won't stop until he wins or dies. Jake looked at his friend. Because that's what Vexnar had become over the past 2 years. A friend, not just an ally. The neural link had created that friendship, had made it possible for a human and a Zelthrian to genuinely understand each other. Then we'll have to show him that the way of life he's fighting for isn't worth preserving, Jake said. Not through force, but through example. We'll keep building connections, keep offering understanding, keep proving that cooperation creates more than conquest ever could. And if people die while you're proving that point? Vexnar asked. Then people die. I can't promise that choosing empathy means choosing safety. Sometimes, the right thing is also the dangerous thing, but I'd rather die trying to build understanding than live having destroyed it. Vexnar was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something in his native language, without using the translator. Jake didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Through the bond they had formed, through the experiences they had shared, communication went beyond language. The message was simple. We'll stand together. On Earth's orbital defense station, Kevin Price prepared the Defiant for potential combat. The ship was now equipped with advanced shields and weapons, alongside the improved neural link systems. They hoped to never use the weapons, but they wouldn't leave themselves defenseless. Lisa Grant coordinated with defense forces from 6 different species, all of whom had formed alliances with Earth through neural link connections. The coalition wasn't as large as Kethra's fleet, but it represented something new in the galaxy. Species working together by choice, not forced by conquest or threat. When Kethra's fleet finally appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, they came ready for war. 800 Zaltharian warships, supported by vessels from 3 other species, all determined to end what they saw as humanity's dangerous influence on the galaxy. But they didn't find a defenseless Earth. They found a coordinated defense network staffed by multiple species, all working together. They found ships positioned not for attack, but for protection. They found a civilization that had spent 2 years building alliances based on understanding rather than fear. And they found something else. Floating in space near Earth, visible to all sensors, was a simple transmission, an open invitation to anyone in Kethra's fleet who wanted to experience the neural link voluntarily. No force, no tricks, just an offer to understand before choosing to fight. Kethra ignored the invitation. His fleet advanced, weapons charging. But behind him, a few ships hesitated. Their crews had heard stories of the neural link, had wondered what it might feel like to truly understand another species. The invitation tempted them. As the battle was about to begin, as weapons locked onto targets and commanders prepared to fire, those few ships that hesitated made a choice. They broke formation. They accepted the invitation. They chose understanding over violence, even knowing it meant betraying their commander, their culture, their old way of life. It wasn't enough to stop the battle. Kethra's fleet still had overwhelming numbers, but it was enough to prove a point. Given the choice, some beings would always choose connection over conflict, and that choice, multiplied across time and space, could change everything. That sounds like a lot of work. It is. But the hard things are usually worth doing. King formation and heading toward deeper space. They left the Defiant alone, damaged but intact. One small human ship that had faced an empire and survived not through weapons, but through vulnerability. Lisa Grant looked at her captain. We did it. We actually did it. Maybe, Jake replied carefully. We started something. Whether we did the right thing, only time will tell. Ed. But they were also hopeful. They had accomplished something impossible. They had split an empire and shown an entire species that another way of living was possible. Reduce the neural link to minimum power, Jake ordered. Maintain the connection, but give everyone's minds a chance to process what they've experienced. As the intensity of the link decreased, both species felt the relief of mental space returning. But the connection remained, a thin thread linking human and Zaltharian minds. The understanding they had gained didn't disappear when the signal weakened. It was part of them now. Multiple ships, breaking formation, Kevin Price announced. They're moving to attack positions. Jake felt it through the neural link before Kevin finished speaking. Felt Kethra's determination to end this confusion with weapons fire. The moment of truth had arrived. Would understanding prove stronger than instinct? Or would fear win, as it so often did? All hands, brace for impact, Jake ordered quietly. Maintain the neural link at all costs. Captain, Helen Baker said quietly. We're receiving a transmission from the Zaltharian fleet. Put it on screen. The image that appeared showed a creature that looked nothing like a human. Commander Vex Nar of the Zaltharian Empire stared at them with eyes that seemed to evaluate and dismiss them simultaneously. When he spoke, the translation came through clearly. Human vessel, you will surrender immediately or be destroyed. You have 1 of your hours to comply. This is your only warning. The screen went dark. The ultimatum had been delivered. 1 hour to surrender or die. But humanity's answer was already decided.